Hey guys, I'm Phaedra from All Things Phaedra. Welcome to my channel, and this is not typically what I do. Typically I cover a lot of cars, entertainment, travel, beauty, well, really, I guess just all things. But I have been bringing you more and more of Weekend Phaedra because Weekend Phaedra does a lot of stuff around the house so that she has money to go out and explore this great big world. So the project today, I say it as if it's going to be a day. The project today that I'm starting on are these stairs. Now, what's wrong with these stairs? Nothing really in theory, but about a year and a half ago, we had matching hardwood floors. It was this butterscotch oak all throughout the house, and we decided to rip it up, and we had some areas were carpet too. And we ripped up the carpet, we ripped up the old hardwood floors, we put down this distressed, aged looking bamboo flooring. I love the flooring. It definitely has its pros and cons, but I love the look of the flooring. The problem is none of it matches. Am I right? We've got the butterscotch here and we've got the dark here. So it is time to give this staircase a refresh. And it's gonna take a while, right, Roscoe? We already did a little bit of work because we used to have a carpet runner coming down the stairs. And when we pulled out the old carpet and we pulled out the old flooring, we decided to get rid of it. And there were a lot of carpet staples on here, so we cleaned up the carpet staples, we cleaned a lot of the dirt and stuff that was under here. And I could leave it like this, but that's not really the look I'm going for. So the refresh that I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of anything that has this butterscotch surface. And I'm going to show you exactly what my vision is. We'll see if it ends up that way. Here's what my vision is. This piece right along here, I plan to paint white. The challenge is, of course, finding a white that will match these balusters. I'm going to paint this part white. Then if we go to the stairs themselves, you can tell that it's not even the same type of wood because the color's similar, but it's not quite the same. I believe these are oak, so they're good stairs, but what I want to do is I want to paint the risers white, and then I'm going to stain the treads a dark brown that's going to match the bamboo flooring. I also need to do something similar with this railing right here. I'm going to stain it so that it matches the flooring. Now I have these columns in here, and I haven't quite decided if I'm going to paint them or stain them because I am going to have some access troubles, but we're gonna, take it step by step. And just to give you an idea of the scope of this project, the stairs go up quite a ways, so we've got a lot of railings to deal with, but wait, there's more. So upstairs, we've got this part that overlooks our family room, and then we've got this part right here. So I get that this is a massive undertaking and it's going to be a lot of work. So I'm going to be painting along here and I'm going to be refinishing up here. Now let me show you the supplies I have for this project. This is not sponsored, but Home Depot is what I have here in my town. So that's where I got a lot of the supplies. And I did talk to some of the local experts there and they gave me a little advice, and I've also watched some YouTube videos and I have read some blogs, and I feel pretty confident that I can tackle this project. It's going to take a while, but I feel pretty confident. My plan is to lightly sand these pieces right here on the side, and for that I have simply a hand sander with different grits. I'm going to do the same thing with the railing, and for that I also bought these sanding blocks which will allow me to get into some of the curves and the grooves. And I'm also going to be sanding the floor treads, and for that I have an orbital sander. I've not used it before, but I'm not trying to get any of this down to bare wood. If I did, I'd probably bring in a professional because that would be some pretty serious work. But everything that I've selected is going to allow me to get just the top finish off and get it just rough enough so that I can actually do the work that I'm looking to do. So over here on the side, after I sand that, that's when I'm going to use this primer. So this primer, think of it like chalk paint, but for heavy duty work, because it goes over finishes pretty nicely without having to do a lot of sand work. I'm going to do the same thing on these risers, on the stairs, a light sanding, and then I'm going to prime them. After the prime dries, then I'm going to use a paint, and I have it's scuff defense. That's perfect for stairs. This is actually a satin finish white that should come pretty close to matching the balusters. Again, because the idea is I want it to blend, and I don't want to have to paint all of these. It might be a close enough color that I could do some touch-ups though. So that will take care of the risers and the base, but what about the handrails and what about the treads? Well, for that, I'm going to be using gel stain. And what I did is I got a sample of my flooring. I took it to the store with me and I matched, and it's going to be pretty close. I've never worked with gel stain before, but from everything that I read, it goes on almost like a paint. So if I'm looking for a really translucent stain, I don't think this is going to be it, but that's not what I want because I don't care about the grain in the oak. I'm really just looking to match the color. So I should be able to sand it down and then cover it with gel stain, wipe it off. I'm making it sound super easy, and I don't think it's going to be, but this is going to be a multiple week project. I'm thinking evenings, I'm thinking weekends, but I have this vision and I think it's gonna come together, so stick with me. So where do we begin? Well, here's where I'm gonna begin. This home was new construction, so we're the first owners, but I have to say I'm less than impressed with the builder. They didn't do a great job, and we have lots of caulking here that's just yucky and cracked as you get further up, and I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna scrape all the caulk off first. I removed all of the caulking, and let me tell you something. When you remove the caulking, you are exposing the shoddy work that was done before. So I've taken off most of the caulking and I sanded it down just a little bit so that it'll be smooth and ready for recaulking. I'm gonna put some paintable caulk there. But before I do that, I've decided that I'm gonna wait on this. I'm gonna do the sanding next and the staining, and then I'm gonna do the caulking and painting. So I still have a lot to do. Well, it's been a while. It's been a long while since I have been working on the stair project. So I've got a new helper, and what I am doing now, after having removed all the caulk, is I'm sanding down everything. So I'm using this small orbital sander. I have gone through and I have sanded all of the exposed surfaces. I didn't worry about this area as much because I know I'm going to prime that and paint it, so that's not as essential, but all of the railings and all of the wood-colored balusters I lightly sanded, and then I taped the heck out of everything in preparation for the stain. Now, the order of operations here is important because paint can cover stain, stain can't really cover paint. So we're doing all of the staining first. And I'm starting with this Varathane gel stain. I've already started, and I will tell you to ventilate, because it does not smell good, and tape way more than you think you do, because I've already made a bit of a mess. I've gotten started, and I want to show you how gel stain works. You're not going to be able to tell much of a difference, but I've already done one coat of the gel stain on this railing and this baluster, and here you'll be able to see the difference. Now, the contrast is not that great because with gel stain, you're going to want to do it in successive coats. So with the Varathane gel stain, it says that I have to wait about 2 hours in between coats, and that I can anticipate doing 2 to 3 coats to get the final color that I want. So let me show you how it works right here. What you're going to do is you're going to apply it across the grain, which is not what you would normally expect. But you're gonna do this to make sure you get in all the little grooves and spaces in between the grain. And once you've got it covered pretty well, then you can go ahead and smooth it out in the direction of the grain. The good thing is you don't have to be really super neat about it. You just want to make sure that you are thorough and you get it everywhere. Trust me, I've been getting it everywhere. Have you also noticed that I have gloves on? I forgot that. I've been wearing gloves while I do this, so definitely you'll want to do that as well. So once you've completed the section that you're working on, you're going to want to just smooth it out, get rid of any big drips, and then let it sit for 2 to 5 minutes. You're going to want to take a clean rag. I just bought a bag of rags from Home Depot, and you're going to wipe. And you're going to notice that the color is not as dark as what you put on there, not as dark as you're probably hoping for it to be. That's why you have to do successive coats. And the hardest part is really making sure you get all of the detailed areas clean. Well, it's the end of the second day of staining, and boy, have I learned a lot. I've learned that this dog doesn't like to be away from me while I'm working on projects. But here's what happened. I didn't like the color of the stain. I liked the color, it just wasn't dark enough. And because I am going over oak, it was really bringing out the grain in the oak, which is exactly the opposite of what I wanted. So I bought a darker gel stain and didn't really fix the problem. And then I did a little research, and then I found out that sometimes it's not about the stain, it's about the application of the stain. So while foam brushes are good, and I do plan to use those for the tread, I have been using, I bought just a bag of rags at Home Depot. I've been using rags to apply the gel stain. And when I did it this way, it was a game changer, because I've read that the gel stain can go on like paint and you want to layer it on like paint. But I was putting it on like stain, brushing it on with the foam brush and wiping it off with a rag and not really seeing much color. Well, let me show you how all of that has changed. So just a reminder, this is close to the color we were starting with, sort of that orangey oak color. And this is after I applied the darker stain. This is the Java colored stain. And as you can tell, it was still very grainy, and I just wasn't liking the way that it looked. So I used the rag method, and this is what I've got now. So you can see that it's starting to get more of the opaque look that I was looking for, and I really think it's looking good. So I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out. The only thing is, and I've read this about gel stain, is that it can be a little uneven. So you'll see some lighter areas and some darker areas. That's okay. So I'm going to let this dry for about 24 hours, and then I'm going to do one more coat, applying it in the same way. And then I think I'm going to have pretty close to the color I want. I'm going to show you quickly with this banister right here how we're going to do this. So first of all, remember, glove up. I'm using a rag that's basically t-shirt material, but I have seen people use socks. And you're just going to take it and dip it into the stain. Looks like this. And then we're just going to wipe it on as if your fingers were the paintbrush, and do a nice, smooth, even coat, rubbing it in, not too thin, not too thick. And the good thing is that if you have smaller detail areas, when you're using your fingers, you can get into those spaces pretty easily. And while I was working on some of the rails down here, taking it all the way down, some of the more challenging areas, I went ahead and put it on the tread just to see how it's going to look. And compared to my floor here, it's probably going to be a little bit darker, but I think it's going to look beautiful, especially once I get all of the white contrast done here. Well, I've made progress. The hallway's still a mess, and you still see some of that orange wood there, but the railings are looking a little bit darker than what I like, but generally it's the look that I'm going for. So I'm really excited that it's coming along, and it's been hard work and I've made mistakes along the way, but it's doing pretty good. So this is 3 coats of gel stain, but now that I know what I'm doing with that rag application, I think probably 2 coats with maybe a little bit of touch up would be fine. So here's what's next, the treads. It's time to do the treads on the stairs, and what is tricky about it is that we kind of need the stairs in our house. So let me show you what I'm gonna do. You'll see that I've taped off all of the areas. I'm just gonna be doing the treads. So I'm not super concerned about being sloppy because I already know that I'm gonna prime and paint this area here and here, but I don't wanna have to paint over dark stain. I've done a couple test areas. So I'm finding that this Varathane gel stain dries pretty quickly. They say it dries in about 2 hours. So my hope is that I'll get all of this coated and keep the dogs off of them. After 2 hours, I'm hoping that I'll be able to do a second coat and then have it dry enough before we go to bed that we can quickly walk upstairs and get to bed. If not, I may have to do the second coat tomorrow. We'll see how it goes. I would say that the stairs are going quite swimmingly. And I want to share the technique that I'm using for this. So I'm back to the old foam brush, but I've learned so much since I started using it. And what I'm doing is just brushing it on the stair tread. Doesn't really matter the direction that you're brushing it. You may have to, if you have any deep grain or any little holes in there, you may have to really shove the stain in there. Now we're combining techniques, and this is where you want to take a rag that has some of the stain on it. You don't want it to be a dry rag. This was the mistake I made originally. And you're going to go along with the grain to kind of give you a finished coat. You're not trying to wipe the stain off. You're just trying to even it out and make it go smoothly with the grain. Remember, we're going to come back and we're going to do at least 1 more coat. I'm guessing we'll do 2 coats and then some touch-up. Okay, back for more staining. Luckily, I've got a really nice day outside today. So I've got all the windows open, getting as much ventilation as I can. This is oil-based, so it does produce a lot of fumes. So let me show you where I am and what I have to do today. These are all the stair treads. Aren't they looking good? And I'm telling you, they are just begging for that white to be in there. It's going to look so good. I'm so happy with how this has turned out. As you saw yesterday, I applied a top coat of the gel, and I did it pretty thickly. I wasn't really intending to, but it came out pretty thick. And I know that because it took quite a while to dry. Now, I feel like it's pretty thoroughly dry now. It's been almost 24 hours, but you can still see that this step especially is pretty light because I'm working to get close to that darker color that I've done over there on the sides. I'm hoping I can get this done with 1 additional coat, but I'm going to make sure it's thoroughly dry, a good 48 to 72 hours before applying a top coat. So here I go with the second coat. It's finishing day, at least for the railings. I'm going to give it a little bit more time for the treads, but we are going to go ahead and put a top coat on these railings. I've given it quite a few days to dry. They recommend at least 72 hours if you are going to do a water-based finish over top of an oil-based stain, which is what I have here. Let me show you what I'm using and how I'm accomplishing this. I'm using this Varathane water-based polyurethane. You can use oil-based. I'm looking for a lower amount of odor. This is also a satin finish because I do not want bright and glossy on my railing. So I'm using this just for the railing because the stair treads I'm going to use a finish specifically designed for floor because that's going to see more traffic and I want it to be a little bit more durable. So for this, a couple things that you need to know. First of all, you want to stir it thoroughly. Don't shake it. If you read online, everything will tell you do not shake it because When it comes to top coats, bubbles are the enemy. So you want to avoid really moving this around. Don't vigorously stir it and don't shake it, whatever you do. And if you do decide to pour it into something, you may want to pour it and then let it settle so the bubbles are eliminated. So this is what I'm using. This is just a cheap plastic tray from Home Depot because I'm going to throw it away when I'm done. And the two things that I am using to apply it are a wool applicator. Now I got this mainly for the stair treads, but I thought, why not? I'm going to use it on these rails. And it's really great because the finish goes into the wool and it does a really smooth application with hardly any bubbles. But because these are rails, I have a lot of little tiny spaces here, and sometimes just the finish gets a little heavy in some areas. So I'm using a brush for this, and this is, I cannot stress enough the importance of using good quality brushes. This is a Linzer brush specifically for water-based stains. And again, you want to get the right type of bristles for the right type of product. And the reason why you need this is because you need very fine, close together bristles, again, to eliminate the bubbles. So I'm kind of just using this in the really small spaces or to go back and kind of smooth over what I've done with the wool. Let me show you. We're going to get just a little bit of the finish on here. And I'm going to start on the outside edge of the railing first. And I am not going to start in the corner because it would tend to glop. I'm just going to gently smooth it out. Smooth it out, covering the ridges as much as possible. You can see it goes on pretty smoothly. Now we're going to do 3 coats of this, so don't worry about doing a heavy coat. Thinner is actually better. But the thing that you do need to know is that you should do your coats fairly close together. So wait at least for this finish, wait at least 2 hours, but not more than 24 hours, because if it gets too dry, the next coat won't adhere and you'll have to do some sanding. So once I get that on, I haven't finished that yet, I want to show you. You see how it starts to get a little gloppy there? That's where I'm going to take the brush and just finish it out. And it sometimes will get down in the cracks here too, and I'm just going to smooth that out gently for this top coat. Three coats are done, and this is actually, it looks beautiful. This is the satin finish, so I'm glad I didn't go for anything glossier than that because it still has a sheen to it. But I think it looks really nice and really elegant. And this product dries so fast. So they say it dries to the touch and you can recoat in 2 hours and then about 6 hours before you want to do any heavy use. And the stair finish that I have, also by Varathane, has the same kind of instructions. So I'm going to go ahead tonight and do an initial pass on all the treads. And then let it dry. That should be good enough for us to walk up and go to bed, and then I will hopefully finish it tomorrow. First coat of the last step, and I thought I would just show you how I'm applying it. I have my polyurethane in here, and I'm using a wool applicator, just lightly coating it. And then I'm rubbing it back and forth on the step. And it is, at this point, producing a lot of bubbles, but I'm not that concerned about it because I'm going to use a brush to smooth it out. So I've actually gone ahead and applied 4 coats of finish to the stair treads, which is what was on the manufacturer's recommendation. And I normally am the kind of person that likes to cut corners wherever I can, and I have learned not to do that. So I made sure I did the 4 coats because the stairs take a lot of beating and I wanted to make sure it had a lot of durability. The next step now is to start to take off all of this tape that I put on here. And again, if you're thinking about shortcuts, we all know that taping is one of the most thankless jobs. But I'm telling you, when I'm taking this off, it looks, first of all, it's so satisfying and it looks so good, and I've got nice clean lines. I prefer the green frog tape, but the blue painter's tape worked just as well this time too. So I'm taking that off, and then I'll show you what it looks like. This is the satisfying part, and I think you deserve to see this. Four coats and several days later, and the stairs are looking beautiful, at least from this direction, because if we turn around, you'll see we still have that oak shining through. So we are on to the final step, and I let the finish cure for a good 4 to 5 days. Even though it dried quickly, I didn't want to risk putting tape on it and have it pull off any of the finish. So what I'm doing now is I'm in tape hell. There's a lot of taping to do for all of the priming and painting that I'm going to do. So I'm going to do some priming probably here, even though it's already white. I don't think the builder ever primed that. So I'm going to prime, and then once that's done, I'm going to prime here. I'm going to paint it, and I'm going to repaint a lot of the trim as well, which is why you see some of the tape there, because I want it to blend. Plus the trim could probably use a little bit of an update. Now that everything has been taped and cleaned up, carpet removed where I need it removed, I don't know if you can see, but I've pulled the edges of the carpet back here so that I can get down in, and I am using a primer. And the primer, if you haven't worked with it before, it's thicker than paint, and you can use, I recommend 1 to 2 coats, and the idea here is that it will paint over more or less any surface, any finish. So if you've got some sort of smooth surface, it's not going to hurt to lightly sand it, just to give it some place to adhere to. But that's what you're really doing with primer, is you are covering up the surface and giving the paint something to adhere to for your top coat. I ended up doing 2 coats of primer on the bare wood here. Well, it wasn't bare wood, but I felt like there was just a little bit of bleed through coming through, especially on the steps and areas where there were knots. There weren't many, but I went ahead and did a 2nd coat of primer, and I think that all I'm going to need to do now is a little bit of caulking, and then let that dry for about a half hour, and then I should be able to do my final coat of trim. But fingers crossed that we can finish this quickly and be done with this project. I don't need a helper today. Not today. Not today. After doing the 2nd coat of primer, I went ahead and put the caulk along all of the edges. I had some pretty big gaps from the builder. So now that that's all filled in, this is paintable caulk, and it only needs to sit for 30 minutes. It's been more than that. So I'm going to go ahead and do the final coat of paint. Well, here it is, the big reveal. What do you think? I am actually super pleased with how everything turned out. It actually looks just like the vision in my head. I probably would have wanted it a little bit lighter, but that was because of the issues I had in the beginning with the stain, and I thought I needed a darker stain, and I really just needed a different application style. But I ended up with the darker, and I don't mind it, and I don't think it provides too much of a contrast between my flooring and the railing, and I think this is just kind of like a nice classic look. So, a couple things that I want to point out in summary. It was not an easy project. It probably took me about 5 to 6 weeks in total. And those 5 to 6 weeks were mainly weekend work. And that amount of time wasn't the amount of time that I spent working. It's the amount of time that it takes to wait for different coats to dry and really just take your time. So I want to provide you a couple of tips that I've learned along the way. Number 1, use good quality products. I used the gel stain, the Varathane gel stain, and the Varathane water-based polyurethane finish. I'm actually really pleased with both of those. They dried quickly, and I think the finish is nice, and they were both relatively easy to work with. Also, buy good paint. I was fortunate that I could find a paint that closely matched the trim that I already had, and I bought a high quality Behr paint from Home Depot that had scuff resistance because I'm gonna need it along these stairs. Green tape, better than blue tape. I expressed my preference for frog tape over the regular 3M Scotch blue painter's tape, and I really noticed that as I was taking the tape off of the stairs, I ended up with a lot of bleed. If you look really closely at the edges of the stairs, you'll see that it's not perfect. So how did I fix that? I had to go back and hand edge a lot of these stairs to kind of cover up the bleed. Be cautious if you have large dogs, because before I was done, I had scratches in the stairs, and when I pulled the tape up, in some spots it actually pulled some of the stain and finish up. So, if this happens to you, don't freak out. All I had to do was just sand down the area a little bit to blend it in, and then I reapplied just one coat of the gel stain thickly, and then I did a couple quick coats of the finish after the stain had dried. So it added an extra day or so to the project, but in the end, I'm really happy with it. I will caution you that it makes your stairs very slippery, which is fine for me because I usually have my shoes on, but my dogs have taken a few spills along the steps. I'd love to hear what you think about my stair project. How did I do? I did this all by myself with a little bit of help from my sister, but this was pretty much all me. And if you get up close and personal, it is by no means perfect, but who's gonna be getting up close and personal with your stairs? I'm really happy with this, and I saved myself a ton of money, and I know that it's a job well done. So thanks for joining Weekend Phaedra for my DIY project. If you have any questions like I did before I started this project, please leave me a comment and I'll be happy to answer as best as I can. And good luck on your DIY project.